the first thing before I talk about the soap that I make and all the good parts of it is that I'm going to tell you what I got going on right here. I wish this was a see-through pot, but all that's in here right now is coconut oil, and I can't really tip it more than that without spilling it. And I have 3 types of coconut oil over here to show you some differences in coconut oil, okay? And so right now all I've done is melt it just because it's so cold right now this time of year that you've got to melt it. If it's warmer and you're doing it in the summer, it may already be in a melted state. So you do, however, have to get it to 100 degrees. Okay, your coconut oil has to be 100 degrees, and in a moment I'm going to mix up the lye, and that has to be 100 degrees. So I work a lot with thermometers, just simple, inexpensive thermometers to measure the temperature of the coconut oil and the lye. So I'm going to mix up the lye, and then we'll come back to talking about the different kinds of coconut oil. And I'm going to do that because this gets really hot and it takes a while for it to cool down. And we can't do anything until this is cooled down. And there's nothing I can do to cool it down except for take it outside, which sometimes I do. Okay, so the first really important piece of equipment that anyone that is making soap should have is a scale. And when I first started making it just for fun, I said, I don't need a scale, and I would just make it, but it really does make things come out precise. It won't ruin anything if you're off on your numbers, but it does make a difference. This is a very inexpensive, cheap scale, but I love it because it's so simple. It's just on and off. There's lots fancier ones, and I also, it gets messy. You know, I spill, and so I don't want my good kitchen scale to be the one I use for my soap. So I have just this one that I use for soap. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the scale, and it goes to 0, and then I'm going to put on my bowl that I'm used for the lye, and it gives me a weight, and then I just zero it out. I say that because I had to learn how to use a scale, so just in case you need to know. I pre-measured the lye just so I wouldn't be having to pour it here. So this is just granulated lye. If you're buying it at the store, I've had a hard time finding it. You can buy it online, but Ace Hardware has been the place that I found it. I haven't found it at Walmart. I haven't found it at like that type of a store, just a hardware store. It's on their plumbing aisle. And they'll have different Drano products, and you just got to make sure you look for the one that is just 100% lye. It still may say like Drano as the product name, but the ingredient is sodium hydroxide, 100%. Okay, so you don't want to have any other Drano products. Does that make sense? They put stuff in some of those. Okay, so this is 4.8 ounces of lye, and I'm just telling you that it's not something you're going to want to memorize. If you are going to go make soap, you're going to want to find a recipe that you want to use, and the lye is going to be balanced with how much water and with how much oil. Okay, so just depend on what you're going to want to make. I'm just demoing the kind of soap that I make because, and I'll tell you why later, but it's not the only kind of soap that could be made. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put on gloves. Sorry, I gotta be good. And that's just because if the lye, the granules even just kind of get on your skin, they do kind of burn a little bit. It does wash off fine with water, but it will burn. My understanding is if the water and lye, like right when you mixed it, if it gets on your clothing, it could like burn a hole in your clothing that you would notice later, like when you're washing. Where'd that hole come from? It'd probably be from the lye getting on you. So ideally, maybe wearing an apron if you care about what you're wearing. I don't wear goggles because I've got my glasses on, and I just am really careful. So if you do this, just be careful. So when you're mixing up lye and water, you put your water in first. Then you pour your lye in. Okay? I haven't done it the other way, but if any of you have YouTubed or looked things up, it tells you that that's the dangerous way to mix lye. Okay? So now I am going to be pouring in 9.6 ounces of water. So I'm just watching the scale, seeing when it gets close. And at home I have lots of other little tools I use, like droppers and things, so that if I get, I got right on. That's pretty cool. Then you can take a drop of water out and stuff. Okay, so I got my 9.6 of water. All right, now you add the lye. You guys see okay? Okay, and I find that temperatures matter in everything you do in soap. So the other day, I was mixing up lye and it was cold in my garage. And I wasn't stirring it vigorously, and the lye actually, I don't want to say coagulated, it kind of hardened on the bottom of the bowl and made a layer of lye. Didn't ruin anything, but I had to like soak the bowl for a long time to try to get that out of there. So I find that it's good to mix it, stir it, as I'm pouring it. Because I think it's actually starting the chemical process as it's hitting the water, and then that temperature, that coldness, did something weird. Can you kind of see the smoke a little bit? I can feel the warmth. Why is it blowing it at me? That's horrible. Excuse me. So what it does is it tickles your throat, makes you cough. It won't kill you. But it was coming towards me. That was really weird. Whew. Okay, so it goes away pretty fast. Don't do what I did, but if you know which way the wind's blowing and you're outside, don't be downwind. So it's that simple though to mix it up. So that's how I leave it when I mix it up. I don't mess with it. It's so hot, I can pick up the bowl like this and move it, but down here, like I've tried holding it down there before, and it will not burn you, but it's hot. So I've got my thermometer, and I'm going to tell you how hot it is when you first start. Sometimes it goes all the way up to 200 or 220. Okay, so it looks like it's in the 200 range. So we have to wait for it to cool down to 100 degrees. But it goes pretty quick. When I've kind of paid attention to it, it kind of cools down about a degree a minute. So it's pretty fast. Okay, so I am going to move this off to the side. Okay. So in this pan, I have the oil, and I want to make sure that it's going to be 100 degrees for when we mix. Yeah. How much? Oh, there is 33 ounces of coconut oil in here. Okay, so right now, this oil's not very hot. I actually turned off the burner as soon as it was almost all the way melted, and then it melted the last few little chunks, so it's not even quite 100. So what I will do is, as this is getting closer, I'll turn it on and we'll kind of gauge the oil. If you ever get your oil too hot, you can take it outside to cool. But this part is really important, and it's kind of tricky to keep the temperatures the same. I've mixed up soap where this is a little bit hotter than this, or vice versa, and the soap comes out a little different. Like I said, it still works, but I'm always going for a really neat look on my soap, and so if it has like a white film on the top, or stuff has separated or dropped down to the bottom, and I'll show you that in a minute, I don't like that because I'm trying to make the soap look a certain way. But if you're making it at home, it will work completely fine. So within 10 degrees of each other, you're good. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to do while we're waiting is I'm going to measure out the essential oil. Okay? So that we'll be all ready for that. So I've got my scale again, and I'm going to turn it on. I like to use glass for all of my soap making things. I understand that you could probably use plastic or those kind of things, so that's just your preference. I find they clean up really nice. It's real easy to get all the soap and oil off of them. So I use an ounce of essential oil in every single one of the 10 varieties that I make. And later you'll have to come up and smell them just to get an idea, because I use an ounce in all of them. You'll notice though that some are stronger than others. And the reason why that is because there's actually a chemical makeup of essential oil, and when it is affected by the lye, there's a chart you can look online, but there's actually a percentage of essential oil that remains, and the rest is, I think they call it consumed by the lye. So it kind of dissipates. And so you can kind of tell by smelling them which ones, you know, have a stronger smell. But I have used an ounce in all of them. So I am going to pour this because this dropper is small. It's for my exactness. Okay, so It's at 99. So then, and you know, you can always use more if you want, especially if you're making it for yourself. So it came to 102. And I found that I don't worry or mess around with the 0.02 because it's like half a drop and it's just impossible to get it out. So I've just put the orange oil in there so that it's ready to go. Our lye is at 130. I'm sorry, I know this is like watching a plant grow. It's really a slow process. And the oil, because I turned the burner on to 1 accidentally the first time, but it helped warm the soap up, is about the same. So I don't want any more heat to go to that. I find the lye cools off faster than the oil cools off, and especially being in a pan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it out of the pan so that the heat from the pan doesn't keep it warm, because my bowl isn't gonna help that. So this is just regular coconut oil. It doesn't even warm up the bowl yet. So the lye is mixed enough. You can kind of see that it's cloudy, but I don't have a layer on the bottom. And sometimes it has little like, not chunks, but little flakes. And that's okay. My oil's at 105 and my lye's at 110. So it's within the 10 degrees that I want it to be at, and as close to 100 as I can get it, okay? Now, it's okay if it sits for a minute, but ideally you want to start mixing it as close. But I wanted to show it to you first. Can you see? Can you see the lye on the bottom? Okay, so now if you can't, I want you to watch. Okay, as we mix, it's kind of fun. Okay, that happened fast. Can you see through the bowl? Do you see how it turned cloudy? Okay, so technically that's showing you that it's, can you hear me if I talk? Okay, that's telling you that it's mixed, but it's not mixed enough because I haven't done it long enough. So I'm going to keep mixing it. So now if I lifted up my little blender, the drops go in and they sink right down. So that's, like I said, how some people judge getting to trace. And so I always just like to move my mixer around a lot. I have a flatter bowl, like more of a square bowl, and I like that actually even better because I feel like I can get to all the edges. Like right here, I'm kind of hitting the side. But I just try to get all the way around. And what you have to be careful of, because I get excited to make sure it's mixed, is not to tilt your mixer because it actually will splash. I've splashed so many times, so I've learned like I can tilt it just a little bit, and I have more than one mixer and each of them work a little bit differently, you know, their speed or how far I can tilt it. So you just have to play around with it, but be careful. If it spills on anything, you can clean it up, no problem. You just really want to not get it on your skin. Okay, so it's still just cloudy. It's not changing. This is actually the color, the cloudiness that it will be. It will just get thicker. So it's still kind of falling in there. So this is when I start playing around with starting to mix stuff, okay? So for example, if I was making a soap that needed diatomaceous earth in it, I'd put it in now just so that as I'm trying to get to trace, it's mixed in really well, okay? Because these hand blenders, everything wants to spin right around the stick part of it. And so I have to lift it up and kind of sink everything down to make sure it gets mixed because you don't want chunks or lumps. I have made soap before where it's not mixed, I didn't know, and there was chunks, and then when you use the soap, it stays dry in the soap. It won't hurt you, but it was turmeric on the one that I did, and you don't want to be orange. Once it's mixed in your soap, it won't make you orange, but a little pocket of turmeric would make you orange. Okay, so just to be careful so I can really show you this swirl, it actually has gotten a little bit whiter. Can you kind of tell the color? It's gotten a little bit whiter. So what I'm going to do now, let's hope this stays. At home I'm able to, okay. So we are going to, and I'm going to take these off because it's mixed in, so it's not going to burn me. So we've got our turmeric, and I'm going to do my spoonful. I'm not going to do a full spoonful because this really colors it a lot. So can you see? So it's probably more of my like heaping teaspoon. Yeah? I just put it in there. Okay. I'm also going to use, I should have done the oatmeal first. Got to think about these things sometime. I'm going to do my oatmeal. So I've got a little bit more heaping because it's kind of falling off. But that's all I'll put in there. And it'll spread around because you don't want a lot of it or you're gonna hurt yourself. And so I gotta dunk these, and it helps blend them up a little bit more. I don't know if you can hear that. Kind of crunches them. Can you see it's even getting a little bit more white? That's a sign of it getting to trace. So when I made the bars of soap that I was telling you about, the color, they look like this, and they were beautiful. I mean, I loved how clean they looked and stuff. So you don't have to put colors in your soap. Okay. So now I'm gonna take the blender out because I'm done with that part. And I'm just gonna hope that it stays. Okay, so here's the fun part. Oh, I didn't put the essential oil in, you guys. Okay, we're gonna do the essential oil now. Okay, so I'm just gonna pour the orange in. The one thing about orange oil, I was glad you got to see the color of the soap before, is that it actually changes the color of the soap. Whereas a lot of the oils, they're just clear, and so it doesn't change the color of your soap, okay? This doesn't have to be anything more than stirred. I could have whisked it. It's kind of fun to see it change colors. So this would be a pretty soap even just like that. You could have an orange, which would be a light yellowish orange. Mostly yellow.
Are you worried about timing right now?
Well, I'm trying to be clean. I can take time because I stopped before trace, and it's still doing its magic even if I'm not mixing it, because it's all mixed together, so the molecules are in there doing their work. But if I waited too long, it would literally harden in this bowl, okay, and you wouldn't be able to put it in a mold. So you do have to be aware of that, but I can feel it, and I can feel I'm okay still, but it is starting to get a little thick. Okay, so now I've got my turmeric that was ready and my little essential oil bowl. I'm going to try to be clean. And so what I do is I just scoop out however much you want, but what I do is it's usually 4 scoops in my bowl. Okay, and I use the same spatula that I used to mix up the lye, because remember, there's lye in our soap, so it's okay. If you want to use 2 separate ones, you could. I'm really trying not to make a mess. Okay. Now I like to use a whisk for this just because the bowl's so small that if I put the immersion blender in here, it'll splash. I feel like people are watching me. You know how you're not always as clean when somebody is? So see, that's a pretty orange color. Now if I had put half that amount and I said, oh, that's not dark enough, you could add more. But once you've added it, you can't take it away. So that's why I always try to go on the lighter end. So I think that's a pretty orange color. Every batch for me turns out a little bit different because it's not an exact measurement, it's just a scoop, right? Okay, so here's the fun part. We've got our base, I'm gonna call it, and then our swirl color. And we are going to literally just pour it right into the mold. You don't have to be careful about this more than just spilling. Now can you see some of that oatmeal? The rest of it was mixed in, but there was a little bit left on the bottom. Now the good thing is, as I scrape this into my mold, it's hardening every second that we're doing this, that it will not all be on the bottom. The time that I did it where it wasn't traced enough, it was all in the bowl, and so then when I poured it in, it all went to the bottom because it wasn't thick enough to disperse that. I would recommend starting with using rolled oats because they're lighter and they won't do what this does. So for swirling, there's no rule or magic. It's just simple pouring. What I do try to do is move around and try to get all the edges, because otherwise I find I have spots that don't have the color in it. But I know that this batch turned out good because as I'm pouring, and I'm sorry you can't see it, but you can come up and see afterwards, the orange is actually on top a little bit. Okay, rather than sinking all down and I can't see it. You guys can tell how messy I am. So with my whisk and how I mixed the turmeric in here, some of it was still on the bottom of the bowl. I just didn't whisk it good enough. So then right now it's literally sitting on top. So like I know that is the viscosity level. Does that make sense? And I like to get out every last drop. I could write my name in it right now. It's like making a cool design. So you have to come up and look at it afterwards. Just don't touch it, okay? You can come up and look at it. So we've got the yellow and then we've got the pretty orange in it. It doesn't smell really strong with the essential oil, but as it cools, you can start smelling it.